Let's be ladies who lunch.
You're not a lady.
Totally a lady, sexy lady.
Jeff is jeffing to the absolute max this season, and I'm going to use that to distract me from how absolutely devastated I am right now. It's not working. Hello, Internet, I'm Ren, and today I want to talk about Yellowjackets Season 3, Episode 9, How the Story Ends. There is so much that happened in this episode, and I have so many feelings about it. My heart and soul are crushed, I am also intrigued, and I can't believe there's only one episode left. So let's break it down. This is going to be another unscripted review and breakdown, so it's just me, my notes, and my hyperfixation. And of course, this video will contain spoilers for Yellowjackets up to this point, so you have been warned. I'm going to structure this video kind of like I did the last one. We're going to break down what happened in the adult timeline and then in the teen timeline, talk about how both storylines culminate at the end of the episode, and then get into some theories. So, without further ado, the adult timeline starts with Van lying in her hospital bed, having hallucinations of younger Van.
Am I dead? Death is around every corner.
Apparently, Liv Hewson and Lauren Ambrose really fought to have these scenes together when they found out what Van's fate was this season, and I'm so glad that they did because it adds so much more dimension to Van's story. Young Van points out that
Ty's still here. Misty, too.
And notes that Shauna ditched her.
Shauna, straight up ditched you. Not piggers.
And then she starts talking about the Goonies.
There's something I need to ask you. Do you remember the Goonies?
A film that our resident cinephile Van has now seen many, many more times since escaping the wilderness.
I've seen this fucking movie like 100 times more than you, literally.
And Van describes the film's central treasure hunt and refers to it sort of as a quintessential hero's journey.
It is a classic hero's journey,
which she uses to motivate adult Van for one last adventure.
X marks the spot. Thais has been trying to show you. Listen to her.
She also injects some kind of viscous black liquid into Van's IV bag. I don't know if we'll ever know what it is, but it seems like some kind of weird essence of the wilderness or something. But whatever it is, it does get Van up and moving. Ty is at her bedside, and Van basically ropes her into one last adventure.
Come on, Ty. Goonies never say die.
I do think it's interesting how Van is being driven by these visions of younger Van at this point. It definitely feels like she still believes in the wilderness and is feeling a more intense connection to it as her condition worsens. So she, Misty, and Ty get on the road on the hunt for Shauna.
Let's face it, we're probably gonna need an alibi.
We don't know what Shauna's done yet.
Oh, I'm sure it's reasonable.
We then check in with Shauna, Melissa, and the hunk of flesh.
Go on. Just take a bite.
It does get into Melissa's mouth, and she chews it. Oh.
Oh, that's nasty.
She then spits it in Shauna's face, you know, the classic spit and run, and goes sprinting outside, leaps into her car, and mows over some wildflowers in front of her house, which does feel like a kind of symbolic destruction of her normal, boring life and the peaceful domesticity that she's created. Unfortunately, as you'll remember from the last episode, her wife used her car and didn't gas it up. And she finds herself stranded on the side of the road when Misty, Ty, and Van pull up. Misty recognizes her immediately.
Melissa!
And once the other two realize that she's right, they run her down. Ty tackles her, and then when she almost escapes, Misty threatens her with a tire iron, which just feels so on brand for Misty.
I don't know how you're still alive, but you won't be much longer if you don't cooperate.
So she gets in the car with them. And Van, seeing a nearby railroad sign, notes that
X marks the spot.
Once in the car with the others, Mel describes the Shauna attack.
She made me eat my fucking arm!
But then the others ask if it was her that sent the tape, and when she reveals that it was, they're not really surprised by Shauna's reaction.
Did you send that tape?
Yes, but there's a lot more to it. More than you sending literal evidence of murder.
And seem pretty unimpressed with Mel for not realizing that this was exactly what was going to happen when she sent Shauna the tape.
How did you think Shauna was going to react?
So they take her back home to her blood-spattered house where Shauna's lying in wait, and seems relieved to realize that the rest of the gang has returned and not just Melissa or worse, Alex. Although I am concerned that her plan was to stab whoever else she was expecting. She admits she has perhaps made the situation a little bit worse.
Okay, I might have made things a little bit worse.
But she does also point out that the tape seems like evidence that Mel killed Lottie.
She admitted that she sent the tape, which means she killed Lottie.
But Misty counters that Shauna is actually trying to scapegoat Mel because of all of the mounting evidence against her,
Not so fast, Martha Misdirect.
including the DNA and the receipt that Misty found indicating that Shauna was in the city on the day Lottie died.
I literally have the receipt.
Shauna, of course, reveals that she went to the city for cat-related purposes, but everyone's pretty skeptical in the moment.
What were you doing there?
I was getting a cat.
Wow, what a totally satisfying answer.
But Shauna still insists that Melissa did it and that she's also responsible for the other stalking incidents.
Melissa sent the tape, so she left the phone and cut my brake and locked me in the freezer.
And we find out that it was actually Misty's fault that Shauna ended up in the freezer.
For the love of God, the freezer was me.
She knew there was a problem with the door and simply just didn't warn Shauna about it.
I would have warned you, but you've been such an absolute asshole that I thought a little time in the freezer would do you some good.
So that does put it a little bit more up in the air whether there is more going on in terms of someone going after Shauna. I do still think she's being stalked, even if Misty's thing was just a coincidence, because I think Mel's story about the tape is really suspicious. But now I do have to admit it could definitely go either way. Shauna basically asserts that now they have a new problem in the form of Mel that they need to deal with, and Misty stands up for herself.
This is Shauna's mess. You can find some other maid to clean it up.
And although Ty defends her,
I just don't think Shauna killed Lottie.
Thank you.
Misty walks out, and we love to see it. Listen, I'm not a Shauna hater, and I know that Misty has her own problems and has done some very bad things.
Don't fuck with me.
But the way that Shauna often uses the other Yellowjackets to solve problems that she has created and then isn't consistently there for them when they need her is a problem. I will say she is there for Ty. Like, we see Ty stay over with her while she's going through a hard time, and they really connect in season 1. And we saw how they were always there for each other in the wilderness and built that really strong foundation of friendship due to her knowledge of Shauna's pregnancy. But when it comes to the others, Shauna really seems like she just doesn't care that much about them. Really, unless there's some kind of mystery drawing them all together, it feels like she could take them or leave them, but especially Misty.
Why did I have to come here for you to tell me this, Misty?
And with Misty, it just feels like she has such a desperation to be needed and to be liked
Well, I just wanted you to know that I followed your instructions to the letter.
that she basically allows people to treat her really poorly. It is something that Walter has repeatedly observed, and it's something that really stood out with the teen version of Misty as well, and pushed her to do some questionable things when she finally was being appreciated, like destroying the box that contains the plane's transponder. So this moment of Misty really standing up for herself against her fellow Yellowjackets and refusing to take this treatment anymore is a really big moment of growth for Misty, and it's nice to see. Misty immediately goes and gets picked up via helicopter by Walter,
I know, right? Part of me was afraid you think it was excessive.
and they fly off to what appears to be his estate or whatever, and they chat about Lottie's murder over chocolate martinis. Walter is very adamant that they've caught Shauna in the act and that Shauna did it because of the DNA evidence.
Do you think we could have been wrong?
What? Her DNA is literally under Lottie's fingernails.
Misty is less convinced, especially because she followed up with the Humane Society and found out that Shauna's story did check out. And Walter insists,
When it comes to the Yellowjackets, I feel your judgment is a touch clouded.
which I do think he's partially right about, but he clearly has ulterior motives in wanting to separate her from them. Once he reveals that he has Lottie's cloned phone on hand, she tricks him into returning to the kitchen to add some chocolate shavings to their martinis, and then goes through the phone. And she seems to immediately find something very disturbing.
Oh my God.
Based on the look on her face and the fact that she is gone by the time Walter returns. And Walter looks so shady here that I almost wonder if he's actually a good guy and this is all just a misdirect and red herring, because the look on his face, suspicious. It's suspicious. Meanwhile, Jeff and Callie are back home. Jeff is elated to have received a job offer from the Joels, and he catches Callie rolling a joint.
Is that weed?
After she points out that Shauna regularly steals her weed, and he critiques her joint rolling technique,
Those nugs are too big. You'll never get an even smoke unless you grind those up somewhere.
they end up smoking together. And it is very fun. At first,
No. Don't go good.
This is so fucking weird.
because to celebrate his job, Jeff wants to be,
Ladies who lunch.
so he wants to take Callie out for a fancy meal that they know Shauna would be mad about.
Mom would kill us if we spent that much.
And Callie admits that a lot of the things that she said about Shauna not being a good person are things that she really does believe, and she kind of tries to get a sense for how Jeff actually feels about her.
Dad, that stuff that you said to the Joels about Mom, is that how you really feel?
And then Jeff very inappropriately starts talking about the marital problems he has with Shauna.
Oh, golly, it is hard being married with your mom. It's lonely.
And that's valid. Being married to Shauna does seem like it would be difficult. Like, Jeff definitely has his own problems.
I got a loan from these guys, and it turns out that they were really bad, scary guys.
But Shauna's are pretty beyond the pale, and she does have a tendency to be standoffish, if we're putting it gently, as well as secretive and mysterious and scary.
People are always so sweaty when you kill them. Just like oily.
But it's still kind of not something he should be talking to his daughter about. This feels like something he should be talking to a therapist or marriage counselor or a friend about. Like, I know Callie asked, but come on, bud. I do like that the fancy restaurant they're planning to go to is called Squab.
Let's go to that new place on Main. Pigeon.
Squab.
Back at Melissa's house, Melissa has been tied up, and Shauna, Van, and Ty are debating what to do with her. Ty mentions Adam.
Come on.
This is kind of like Adam.
Except there's no body yet.
Who's Adam?
And that whole situation, which is, of course, not very smart. As Shauna points out, now Mel has that leverage.
Why did you say that?
This happened before and there was a body?
And Shauna sees a pretty clear solution to that problem.
You just dug her a grave. You know that, right?
But once they really start digging into that, into the fact that she killed someone due to previous suspicions, and now is in a similar situation,
So Shauna killed this Adam, made you guys clean it up.
Mel brings up some pretty good points about how she's put her friends at risk and used them to solve her problems.
And let me guess, she was wrong then too?
Although Shauna also brings up some good points.
Her family doesn't even know her real name. What kind of psychopath brings home a dead woman's tape and marries her daughter?
To which the others react with appropriate horror and shock.
Holy shit, you married Hannah's kid?
Mel is seated by the fireplace, and while Ty and Shauna continue to try to figure out the situation, Van goes out to the car for something, and we see Mel pull a lever on the fireplace that closes the flume, which basically seals the chimney so that all of the smoke from the fire diverts back into the living space instead of up and out the chimney. And that's where we're going to leave the adult timeline for now. So let's talk about what's going on with our cannibal teens. The teen timeline pretty much picks up where it left off, with the standoff between Shauna and Natalie and the girls who want to leave and the ones who want to stay. I know I always lump Travis in with the girls. It's not because I don't recognize that he's not a girl. It's just that he's sort of along for the ride in most things and carried by the wave of the girls' decisions. Lottie still insists that they should stay because it's
What it wants.
Ty makes it clear that her main motivation for wanting to stay is not to permanently live in the wilderness, but to finish tying up all of the loose ends to ensure that they don't go back to jail, prison,
Imagine what'll happen when the rest of the world gets here. What's the point of going back if it means ruining our lives?
for all of the murdering that they have done at this point. Which, you know, it's somewhat valid. I do think there's definitely going to be evidence of cannibalism on some of those bones, and Edwin's corpse is fresh enough that they probably could figure out what happened to him if they find and exhume him. So Ty is not entirely incorrect here. Cody appears to be delusional because he seems to still think that he's going to be leaving.
I found braiding each other's hair and partaking in some light cannibalism. I'm fucking out of here.
So he turns to leave, and Shauna easily grabs the gun from Natalie, like with basically no resistance. Natalie, girl, what are you doing? You have given up your leverage. And she points it at him. He's generally a bit misogynistic about the whole thing.
You sure you even know how to use that info?
And submits when it becomes apparent that she does indeed know how the gun works. I didn't notice it until I was editing and using a clip from the confrontation Shauna has with the chop shop guy in season 2 over her minivan, but this scene mirrors that beat for beat. From the misogynistic comments,
You sure you even know how to use that info?
I can see your hand shaking. This is cute and all.
to Shauna's hands shaking in anticipation of murdering a dude. I know this show goes off the rails a bit sometimes, but it really is the little things. So they decide they're going to bring them back to the animal pen and keep them without any shoes on. And there is this intense stare down between Shauna and Cody once he's been successfully relegated to the pen. Meanwhile, Ty and Van talk about Ty's decision to stay. Van is really concerned about the approaching winter, and Ty is a lot less concerned about it.
Could you please try and remember what winter was like?
She points out that they survived, and Van points out they survived by eating a child.
We survived. We ate a fucking kid.
And Ty seems to think they're actually prepared for winter, but Van has a much more realistic assessment of their situation.
We're prepared this time. We're not.
Which is that they are not prepared to survive another winter out there and will probably end up eating each other some more.
That game will run out eventually, and you and I both know what comes next.
Which we know she's right about. But Ty isn't worried about it because Van has been practicing with the cards.
Good thing you've been practicing with the cards.
So now we know that that comment she made about wanting to tell Ty to pick a different card,
Trust me, I wish I could have told you to pick a different card.
was actually because during the draw she had tried to fix it so that neither she or Ty would be the executioner, and she's clearly planning to fix the draws going forward to keep her and Ty safe from any future hunts. I can't blame her. I wouldn't want to be hunted by these girls in the wilderness. Travis goes into the woods and builds a trap over the pit, and he lures Lottie out there by telling her that he had like another vision or another feeling.
I think it was trying to talk to me.
By the pit, he then confronts her about how none of this is real in sort of the same way that he confronted Aquila, but with a lot more anger since she's directly impeding their return to civilization.
We have a chance at rescue? Do you not get that?
And she tries to tell him that Javi is still with them, and we get some perfectly timed wind in the trees.
I just wanted you to feel him too.
And Lottie starts walking towards the pit, but at the last moment, a twig cracks, and she seems to just know that it's a trap, and she just turns around and gives Travis this like knowing look, and then walks away. Fun stuff. And of course, we knew Lottie wasn't going to fall in the pit since we know that she survived to adulthood, but it was definitely an intense moment and kind of demonstrated that intuition that she's so known for in the teen storyline. Factions sort of form between the girls who want to stay and the girls who want to go. The girls who want to go refer to the girls who want to stay as Team Crazy, which, yeah. But Nat, Aquila, Jen, and Mari are trying to put together a plan to escape with Hannah and Cody and go home. Shauna is immediately suspicious that they are up to something, correctly so. And because she's annoying and often excluded from their meetings, Misty volunteers to be a double agent. She immediately tries to infiltrate them by just pretending she knows about the plan.
I just thought you guys were part of the plan.
And it kind of does work despite her affiliation with Team Crazy.
Wait, does she know something?
Meanwhile, Van sneaks off and tries to fix the satellite phone. We see her scavenging components from the airplane and that she's buried the phone somewhere outside of camp. Misty kind of puts it together and realizes that, hey, she might know where some additional components could be found. In the animal pen, Mel chats with Hannah while they play tic-tac-toe. They talk about TV. Mel really misses the real world, but Hannah hasn't kept up with it because she's mostly got kids programming playing.
It's mostly Nickelodeon on at home these days. I have a daughter. She's 10.
Oh, shit.
So it turns out she didn't give her daughter up for adoption from the sound of it. She's actually just raising her child. And that's really sad. But it does kind of feel like she's sort of trying to get on Melissa's good side. And hey, can't really blame her for wanting to stay on the good side of the teenage cannibals.
I'm sorry. I just really miss her.
But she seems really impressed as a scientist with the nature of their survival.
This is the most fascinating study of survival I've ever witnessed.
And notes that it's even more interesting than horny frogs.
Even more so than horny frogs.
Probably because teenage girls are even hornier.
And Shauna sees them talking and is immediately pissed off. So Melissa goes to talk to her, and she confronts Melissa and claims that Hannah is manipulating her.
She just wants you to feel bad for her. She's manipulating you.
I don't think that she is. And yeah, I do feel kind of bad.
And starts kind of immediately verbally abusing her.
I didn't think you were this fucking stupid.
And I do think she is right that Hannah was trying to manipulate Melissa to an extent, but the way that Shauna reacted really shows Shauna's true colors in this moment and just how hateful and depraved and angry and just bitter she's become. And their dynamic actually feels like it's starting to mirror her and Jackie's dynamic, where she sees herself as the Jackie in this relationship and Mel as the Shauna, who is inferior and easy to control. Their fight goes outside the hut, and Shauna says a lot of really cruel things to Melissa.
No one gave a shit about you until me.
You're nothing.
I'm the most interesting thing about you.
Everyone looks on in horror as it escalates.
Jesus.
And Melissa asks,
why can't you just be a nice person?
and I have to say, I think this moment would hit a lot harder if we didn't see Melissa like sneering and smiling and egging her on in all of Shauna's worst moments this season.
Feel that right now? That's fucking power.
Like, Melissa hasn't really demonstrated that she's a nice person. She's been somewhat nice to Shauna, but ultimately she's really tried to kind of incite the worst things about Shauna and encourage her worst impulses.
I like that you're not afraid of the bad parts of yourself anymore.
So while I still empathize with her, and I certainly don't want to blame her for what's happening because it's domestic abuse what's happening, I'm still surprised that she's surprised. Everything really comes to a head, though, when Melissa proclaims that
You guys are right.
She's fucking nuts.
as we know, Shauna doesn't like feeling judged. And in this moment, she clearly feels very judged. So to sort of reassert her power, she pulls out the gun and she points it at Melissa. Totally a rational, balanced reaction to this situation. Melissa basically dares her to do it.
I fucking dare you.
And Shauna pulls the trigger. And the bullet grazes Melissa, who of course is terrified and wets herself. And it's worth noting, as a lawyer, that is assault. Even just pointing the gun at Mel was assault, because assault is actually immediate apprehension of harmful or offensive contact with your person. So it's the fear that someone's going to hurt and kill you, whereas someone actually physically harming you is battery, or if you die, murder, manslaughter, etc. So what Shauna did here is domestic violence and a crime. She pointed a gun at Melissa, knowing that it would make Melissa fear for her life, and then she shot at Melissa to further escalate that fear. Indefensible, horrible, shocking behavior even for Shauna, and all of the girls seem stunned by it. Van notably jumps in to help Melissa cover herself and get her somewhere where she can go clean up, because Van is a decent person for the most part. I think people give Van too much leeway because of how much we all love Van, but as the Yellowjackets go, she could be worse. One thing that really gets me, though, is the look on Shauna's face after she takes the shot and sees just how scared it made Mel. Like, she really relishes in that fear and the superiority that she feels in that moment. The acting from Sophie Nélisse there is amazing, but also horrifying. Deeply, deeply troubling. And Melissa decides to join the other side because...
Fuck, Shauna.
Fair enough. So Mari brings Hannah out to pee, and Nat sneaks her a knife.
When everyone's sleeping, cut yourself and Cody free. We're gonna make a run for it.
When they think everyone is asleep, Cody asks her to cut him loose, and Hannah hesitates.
Who's Eric Chung? His name is on your rucksack.
And Cody's evasive. He gives the same excuse that Hannah did.
I don't know. Got a thrift store.
And insists that she should free him if she wants to see her kid again. So Hannah does free them both, and as they're trying to escape, they are immediately caught by Shauna.
Fucking knew it.
Just right away. They don't even make it out of the pen. Hannah blames Cody for the escape, claiming that he somehow obtained the knife, and then she stabs him in the eye with it. Cody goes down, and Hannah tells Shauna,
Please. I want to be part of this.
So, let's talk about how these two stories culminate. Jen and Mel meet up with Nat in the woods and tell her what happened.
Hannah shoved a knife through that girl's face.
I'm sorry, what?
We're not going? No, Shauna knows.
And Nat is absolutely devastated as the realization that they are not going home sets in and the snow begins to fall. I feel like this moment is where Natalie's spirit is almost sort of irretrievably broken, even more so than what happened with Javi.
The wilderness chose.
Or Mercy killing Coach, which she was kind of forced into. I think this brief moment of hope, followed by this utter crushing despair, is something Natalie never really comes back from, even when they are finally rescued. Honestly, the fact that as an adult, Natalie ever talks to Shauna, Ty, or Lottie again is kind of stunning. That is an intense trauma bond. Anyways, she sees a light through the woods and follows it to find Misty digging up the transponder. Misty reveals the part that she's taken from it and said,
I know how to get us home.
And Nat's reaction to Misty having the transponder feels like it could go either way. She seems pretty angry, which is understandable.
Oh my god. You have the fucking transponder?
And that's where we leave the teen timeline. In the adult timeline, Van comes back to the house and finds everyone passed out from carbon monoxide poisoning. She rescues Ty first, because priorities, and uses her oxygen mask to wake her up. And we get this sequence for Ty where we see bad Ty answering the phone and hearing Van's pleas for her to breathe and wake up. And good Ty basically gets her out of the way.
You're not what she needs.
And good Ty finally takes over, and she's the one we see wake up. Then Van goes back in for Shauna, and then she goes back in for Melissa. She cuts Melissa's bonds and then has this moment where she contemplates killing Melissa as a sacrifice to the wilderness. She tells Melissa that she's thinking this.
I have cancer, and if I can kill you right now, maybe I'll be allowed to live.
And Melissa initially resists.
Those sacrifices, those rewards, no, they weren't real.
But then decides to submit.
I'll be your sacrifice.
But of course, Van doesn't go through with it.
Why? Why can't I be that?
Because as Mel observes, that just isn't the person that Van is.
You don't want to be.
But it is the person that she is. And she takes the knife, which is still in Van's hand, and lifts it up and stabs her right in the chest with it.
But I do.
And we watch as Van starts to bleed out, Melissa escapes, and Van finds herself in the same plane Natalie did. And she's watching her death play on one of those sort of old-fashioned TV screens that used to be at the front of the plane. It's a nice tribute for our resident cinephile, but it crushes my soul. And of course, we should have known what was going to happen as soon as Radiohead started playing, but I was still absolutely floored. So my prediction that Van was going to live beyond this season was clearly incorrect. I am very sad, although I do think it's interesting it sort of inverted my prediction that Ty would sacrifice herself for Van, because here we sort of had Van sacrifice herself for Ty. Like, not directly, but that does feel like that's what's happening. She finds young Van on the plane with her in the same way that young Natalie was on the plane when Nat died.
I know. It's hard to watch.
And old Van seems very shocked that she's dead.
Die?
Adult Van asks,
Why would you send me in there if you knew I was just gonna die?
And young Van says
it wasn't my call. This is just how our story goes.
And that she did get to be the hero, both in literally saving them from the carbon monoxide and in restoring Ty to her true self.
You got the real love of our life back.
You showed me a better treasure.
And then she says that
surviving this was never the reward.
And when Van asks her to elaborate, she basically says,
where would be the fun in that?
And that's the end of the episode. No! I loved both Vans, even with their morally gray, questionable actions, even with their on and off wilderness devotion, even with them essentially causing the escalation that ultimately killed Natalie in season 2.
We reached out earlier requesting a crisis team. We're gonna bring her to Whitlock General ourselves.
I love Van. I love Liv Hewson. Their performance in this role is fantastic. And Lauren Ambrose really effectively took up the mantle in the role of adult Van, and they worked so well together in terms of really building similar mannerisms and speech patterns. I just love both their characters, and I'm so sad. I'm trying to have faith in the writers here.
I just feel like Lottie, Van, and Cody were all killed off kind of prematurely in the story. And so I'm really trying to trust them that it's all going to work out in a way that's satisfying. Like, right when they're losing me, every season just gives me an absolute gut punch with the finale. So that is what I'm expecting here.
I do see a lot of people insisting that there's a huge decline in the quality of the writing this season, and personally I don't agree. I think all of the problems we're noticing now are problems that were there in the first season, and I think a lot of the stuff that's good is really good. So let's get into some theories to try to ease my broken heart. So I do think Van was actually Ty's unknowing sacrifice, and that the wilderness, if it exists, chose to kill Van in order to save Ty, knowing that that was the only way forward. I think if Van had lived, even if our Ty won in this initial battle with the carbon monoxide, I do think she would have resurfaced. I think Mel is up to something. I still can't believe she just straight up abandoned her family. I think when I was watching the episode, I actually shouted at the screen, "Ma'am, you have a family, where are you going?" I don't know what she thinks is going to happen, because Shauna could totally just lie in wait for her family, and she has now left them to that possible fate. Realistically, they're just going to come home in a bloodstained house with a dead Van lying in their living room. Cool. Very normal, boring life stuff.
I would expect even good Ty to be out for revenge after this, so I guess I do understand her fleeing in terror, but it is a wild gamble to just leave her family. Ty finding Van is so absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
that it's on the level of at least 2 infamously heartbreaking Buffy episodes.
We're not supposed to move the body.
Which is at least fitting for the show's nostalgic 90s vibe.
But I think with the tape and the escape and her continual insistence that Shauna is the problem, this is really like a revenge situation where she was going after Shauna and was targeting her. I think she may have also gone after Lottie. Because the thing with Melissa is she does a really good job of playing the victim, and sometimes she is the victim, but she does flip on a dime from this unassuming, innocent-seeming person to this very dark, twisted person. We saw it with the way that she interacts with Shauna and eggs on her violent impulses, and we saw it in the way that she acted like she was the totally reasonable, innocent victim in this situation.
Shauna's gone off the fucking deep end.
And then killed Van as soon as she had the chance. That said, her killing Van wasn't totally unprompted. I do think a lot of people are basically painting Van as way too innocent in this situation. Like, she did stand looming over Melissa with a knife, threatening to kill her, and Melissa did kill her in a moment when it seemed like she wasn't going to do it, and the moment had really passed, but I do think that context is kind of important when considering the escalation. Because immediately before that, Melissa had said,
I promise you, if you leave me alone, it could end now.
This is clearly not where it ends. We are definitely going to see Melissa again. I am just terrified about what the context that we will see her in will be. I think there's a very good chance that she's going to kill someone. I do wonder if Melissa is involved with the cult or some former cult members or with Walter, because Walter is very shady in this whole situation. I do think there is a good chance that either Mel or Walter killed Lottie. Walter is very obviously trying to set up Shauna. He was resistant to Misty wanting to dig more and seemed way too satisfied by a single piece of evidence that tied Shauna to the crime. And I do think the reason he took Lottie's phone was partially to get Misty to talk to him again, but it was also partially to try and hide whatever linked him to the crime from her. But that's just a guess. I think Callie's acting kind of strange. She's definitely pulling away from Shauna for reasons that do make sense given the research that she did and all of the other context. She is also getting a lot closer to Jeff and kind of seeming to try to be driving a wedge between Jeff and Shauna. And I am still wondering if she killed Lottie or was otherwise involved in Lottie's death. Maybe it wasn't entirely intentional. Maybe she was just pulled into some kind of wilderness ritual thing and got scared. But I do think that she has some kind of involvement, maybe.
Jeff having some involvement isn't off the table either. We saw the scratches on his hand again in the previous episode, and we don't necessarily know when he left the bingo ladies on the day that Lottie died.
However, I am terrified that something is going to happen to Callie or to Jeff. I'm scared that Melissa might track them down and hurt them or kill them to get to Shauna, or that whoever went after Lottie will actually go after one of them, because of course they think they're totally safe, and I still think someone's after Shauna. Regarding who else could have killed Lottie, I have moved Ty and Shauna down the list. I do think Mel, Walter, and Callie are the most likely suspects, with some involvement from Mr. Matthews. I still want to have Card Guy in there as a wild card, but I do think it's less and less likely. It seems like he actually wasn't important at all, so I guess I was wrong about that, but we'll see. So let's talk about some theories in the teen timeline. I think the animosity is going to keep growing between the factions the longer that they are still stranded out there. And I think the power struggle between Natalie and Shauna will continue to escalate. I think Hannah is going to try to get closer to Shauna. And I think Shauna is going to sort of lean into that at first and then will turn on her. I think the next hunt might be the Pit Girl hunt. And while I still think it's likely that Hannah will be Pit Girl, if she's not and it's Mari or less likely Jenna or Robin, I think that Hannah will actually be in more of a leadership position. I think there's even a not 0% chance she could end up being the Antler Queen herself.
Although this whole creepy hair thing does make me think there's also a chance it could be Shauna.
I think there's a certain darkness to Hannah that I'm excited to explore. People noted it in her sort of lack of a reaction to Edwin's death, which I attributed more to shock, but with what she did to Cody and the way that she's acting with the girls, it really feels like there's more to her and sort of a dark undercurrent to her that mirrors Shauna.
I am curious if she did all this just to survive, because it is a good strategy. It does give the girls the same blackmail material on her that she would have on them, and she's probably banking on impending rescue from other resources. But it's hard not to wonder if her scientific curiosity may have gotten the better of her in this instance.
From a purely scientific perspective, this is the most fascinating study of survival.
with results she'll undoubtedly regret.
I think Shauna's going to use the wilderness to justify more and more depraved stuff, even though she obviously doesn't really believe in it. And I think she's going to use it to torment Mel. I think that any form of judgment against her is really what's going to enrage her. I think that's what really made her pop off on Mel like that. And I think Ty is still going to keep backing her up because they have this weird symbiosis. I still think they're going to be found by a search party rather than by Misty and Natalie somehow repairing the sat phone, but we'll see. I think Cody was really shady and suspicious, but now I'm not sure how we're ever going to find out what his deal was, but it feels like he definitely murdered someone at some point or was involved with people who did. I think something's going to happen to the animals like it did in Akila's vision, which will probably make them resort to eating each other sooner rather than later. And I think Lottie's going to continue to be disgraced until her next accurate vision. One thing I really liked in this episode is that the breakdown in Melissa and Shauna's relationship and the breakdown in Ty and Van's relationship sort of mirror each other, where both Ty and Shauna are behaving in really questionable ways that harm their partner, while the other person is sort of forced to navigate that in this horrifying situation in the wilderness. Obviously, Ty and Van have a deeper relationship, and I think their relationship can come back from this, whereas Mel and Shauna's definitely can't.
One last thing I want to address before we go is the inevitable arguments that Van's death is a bury your gaze situation. And especially coupled with Ben's death, I can totally understand why people would feel that way. But I actually think it's just an inevitability of a horror show with a high body count that has such a high proportion of queer characters. So it's just a bit of a double-edged sword, and that's not why I'm mad about Van's death.
But that's all I have for you for now. Are you as devastated by this episode as I am? Who do you think killed Lottie? Who else do you think is not long for this world? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe for more videos. See you next time. Wiedersehen. And please appreciate the low-key Shauna costume per your requests.